Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled The Saga of Emrys Corbin, the Steward's Journey of Balance and Renewal. Emrys Corbin woke before the first pale streaks of sunlight had crept across the horizon. The chill of early spring still clung to the air, wrapping his shoulders in a thin cloak of dampness as he crept from his modest thatch-roofed cottage. In the distance, the low hills of Windmere rolled toward the eastern sky, their gentle curves obscured in a soft lavender gloom. Emrys paused at his door, inhaling the crisp air, and for a moment allowed himself to simply stand breathing in the faint, sweet tang of damp earth and the hopeful promise of a new day. In the dim light, the village of Windmere stirred to life around him. Smoke curled from chimneys like gray tendrils searching for something beyond the rooftops, lanterns flickered behind tiny window panes, casting golden pinpricks of warmth against the lingering cold. From somewhere down the lane, Emrys could hear his mother humming a lullaby as she stoked the hearth fire, and the soft clatter of his younger sister Rowan's wooden shoes as she padded sleepily toward the kitchen. Emrys tightened the leather straps of his weathered satchel and set off toward the fields. Each morning he accompanied his fellow villagers to tend the young shoots of barley and flax, coaxing them from furrowed lines of dark, fertile soil. For 5 seasons he had worked these fields, and he knew every ridge and hollow by heart. Yet this morning felt different. An undercurrent of anticipation hummed beneath the routine, like the low vibration of hidden wings. By the time Emrys reached the edge of the barley fields, the sun had begun its ascent, painting the sky in widening bands of rose and amber. The villagers were already at their tasks, bending over the young stalks, pulling weeds, and laughing quietly as they shared stories of children's antics or the old tales of fair folk that once danced at twilight among the hedgerows. Emrys offered a nod and a faint smile, but his eyes drifted toward the far boundary of the fields, where a line of ancient cedars stood sentinel. Legend held that those cedars were older than Windmere itself, tall, gnarled centuries that marked the border between the cultivated land and the untamed wild. Few dared to venture beyond their stony roots, where ancient stones lay half buried beneath brambles. Sometimes, villagers whispered, strange lights flickered among those boughs at dusk, and the air carried a faint echo of laughter not meant for human ears. Master Ulrich, the village elder, intercepted Emrys with his walking staff, tapping the toe of his polished boots against the soft earth. His wise eyes, as grey and weathered as storm clouds, fixed on Emrys with a knowing intensity. "You seem restless today, lad," Master Ulrich said in a hushed tone. "The spring rains have come late, the fields thirst. Yet you stand apart from them, as though you seek something more than barley sprouts and dawn's promise." Emrys bowed his head respectfully. "My thoughts drift, Master Ulrich. I cannot explain why. My father's memory stirs within me the stories he used to tell me of distant lands beyond the sea, of champions born from humble seed. I feel restless, as if my destiny awaits farther than these fields." The elder surveyed the young man's face, noting the flicker of determination in his dark green eyes. He placed a kindly hand on Emrys' shoulder. Destiny is a curious thing. It often finds us in the quiet moments between earth and sky, when we least expect it. But heed this, every great journey begins at home, in the ordinary acts of kindness and courage. If your path truly beckons, you will feel it in both your heart and your feet. With that, Master Ulrich turned away, leaving Emrys to his thoughts. A sense of comfort settled around him, reminding him that the simple tasks of tending the fields had a purpose all their own. He drew a deep breath, filling his lungs with the scent of barley and dew, and began to join his neighbors in their work. Hours passed as the sun climbed higher, and the furrowed land yielded to Emrys' diligent effort. He wove through neat rows, gently removing stones and roots that threatened to choke the young stalks. As he knelt to clear a stubborn patch of earth, his fingers brushed against something cool and smooth half buried beneath the soil. Pausing, he dug carefully around it, revealing an intricately carved token of dark, polished wood. It bore a swirling pattern that reminded him of the twisting roots of the cedar trees, an elegant design he had never seen before. Curiosity bloomed in Emrys' chest. He lifted the token, turning it over in his palm. The pattern seemed to shift in the light, as though alive with hidden energy. A soft hum, almost imperceptible, thrummed through his fingertips, sending a quick pulse up his arm. Around him, the noises of the village faded, replaced by a faint rustle that sounded like whispers from some distant world. Before he could ponder the token's significance, a sudden clap of thunder rattled the sky. Dark clouds rolled over the sun, and a cool breeze swept across the fields. Villagers looked up with worried expressions, exchanging anxious murmurs. The spring rains had already been fickle, and a storm could spell ruin for the tender crops. Emrys slipped the wooden token into his satchel and rose to his feet. He scanned the horizon and saw the line of cedars silhouetted against the darkening sky. A flash of bright lightning illuminated their twisted shapes, and for an instant, Emrys was certain he saw movement among the branches, as if someone, or something, stood watching him from the gloom. A flash of fear pricked at his spine, but it was replaced by a burning resolve. He knew, in that moment, that the token was more than a simple relic, it was a sign. A call to venture beyond the known, to uncover the truth buried beneath centuries of village lore. The first raindrops fell, cool and merciful on the hot earth. Emrys heft his satchel, steadying himself against the sudden wind. He turned back only once to glance at the fields he had tended so faithfully, then strode toward the line of cedars and the unknown that lay beyond. As he crossed the boundary from cultivated land into the realm of ancient trees, the air changed thicker, scented with moss and secrets. The path beneath his feet was carpeted with fallen needles, soft and timeless. Somewhere overhead, a blackbird called, its note echoing like a lament. Emrys paused, his heart thudding, and looked around. The forest seemed to lean closer, waiting. He opened his satchel and ran his fingers over the carved token. "Tell me your secret," he whispered, "and I will awaken to my destiny." At that moment, the wind stirred the treetops, the thunder cracked again, and the token began to glow with an otherworldly light. Thus, Emrys Corbin's ordinary morning in the misty fields of Windmere gave way to the extraordinary threshold of destiny and adventure born of a drops of rain, an ancient token, and the brave heart of a young man ready to leave home in search of a promise whispered by dawn. Emrys Corbin pressed forward beneath the bowed boughs of the cedars, each step taking him farther from the sunlit fields of Windmere and deeper into an overgrown realm that seemed suspended between twilight and storm. The carved token burned softly against his ribcage, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of the falling rain. Drops pattered on his cloak and trickled down the collar of his shirt, but Emrys barely felt them. His senses were attuned to every rustle in the undergrowth, every shifting shadow beyond the trembling trunks. Lightning forked overhead, illuminating the forest in stark white flashes. In one such flash, Emrys glimpsed a narrow path veering off to the left, obscured before and after by walls of bracken and ivy. Drawn by instinct, he turned down that hidden corridor of trees. The air here smelled of wet moss and ancient stone, as though the forest itself exhaled secrets stowed away for centuries. Roots braided across the path like sleeping serpents, and Emrys leapt over them with the lithe grace of a born woodsman. His heart pounded. He could feel the token's pulse grow stronger, drawing him onward in a silent summons. He slowed his pace, reaching into his satchel to retrieve it. The wooden disc was carved on both sides, one face for the swirling cedar motif he had discovered in the field, the other exhibited an unfamiliar rune, a spiral enclosed within a ring of tiny dots. The token trembled in his hand, as though alive, and a soft whisper curled in his mind. Emrys tasted awe and fear all at once. "Seek the lantern, where shadows dance," the voice breathed. It was neither male nor female, young nor old, it echoed with the resonance of leaf and stone. Startled, Emrys looked around, but the forest offered no answer, only the steady downpour and the roar of wind hurrying across the canopy. He tucked the token back into his satchel, covering it with a scrap of cloth. Steeling his nerves, Emrys continued down the path, his eyes straining for any sign of the lantern. Minutes ticked by. Branches scraped overhead, and mud squelched beneath his boots. The rainhammer grew insistent, urging him onward. At last, the trees opened onto a clearing ringed by towering oaks whose trunks were scorched black by long-ago fires. In the center of the clearing stood a weathered stone pedestal, and perched atop it was a brass lantern, its glass panels fogged with moisture. No flame flickered within, but the lantern radiated a curious warmth that rippled through the thinning mist. Emrys approached slowly, half expecting the rune on his token to flare in recognition. He set his satchel down and reached for the lantern's latch. The moment his fingers brushed the metal, the forest seemed to exhale, and a silence deeper than absence settled over the clearing. The wind stilled, the rain ceased. Even the distant rumble of thunder faded into nothingness. Emrys held his breath, eyes fixed on the lantern's paneled sides. Then, with a soft click, the latch opened, and a pale blue flame ignited within. It danced gently, casting quivering shadows against the pedestal and illuminating a web of moss-covered stones arranged in a spiral around it. Inscribed on the stones were faint runes matching the spiral on Emrys's token. The flame pulsed once, twice, and then shot a thin beam of light directly at the forest floor. Where the beam touched, the earth shivered, and a hidden hatch slid aside, revealing a narrow stairway descending into darkness. Emrys's pulse thundered in his ears as he bent to peer down. The steps were carved from living rock, slick with moisture, and disappeared into a yawning blackness. The blue flame's glow was too fragile to reach more than a few feet below. Yet he could sense the concealed space extended far deeper, as though the roots of the world itself slumbered beneath those stones. "Answer my call," the whisper coaxed again, stronger now. "Reveal the path." Emrys's hand closed around the lantern's handle. He hoisted it, feeling the comforting weight of its metal casing. With determination, he descended the steps, each footfall echoing faintly against the stone walls. Behind him, the hatch sealed with a quiet grind, and the only light in the world was that small, flickering flame. At the bottom, he stepped onto a smooth stone floor inscribed with a vast circle of runes. The walls surrounding him were carved into reliefs, twisted cedar trees bent in reverence around a figure robed in flowing cloak, whose face was concealed by shadows. That figure raised a hand, palm outstretched, and within it floated countless tokens identical to the one Emrys carried. The relief's eyes seemed alive hollow sockets that watched Emrys's every move. He approached the carved figure, holding the lantern aloft. The flame's light pooled in the emptiness of the figure's eyes, and a low hum echoed through the chamber. Emrys fought to steady his breathing. The whisper erupted again, richer now, as though emanating from the very walls. "You are chosen," it intoned. "Bearer of the Sita's gift. It is time to awaken." The rune on his token flared to life in Emrys's satchel, thrumming with energy. He dropped the lantern onto a nearby ledge and knelt before the carved figure, retrieving the token. Guided by intuition, he pressed the rune-etched face of the token against the relief's outstretched palm. Instantly, the runes carved in stone brightened, and the entire chamber resonated with a surge of energy. A wind gusted below, extinguishing the lantern's flame, but Emrys did not flinch. The rune on his token glowed brighter still, illuminating the intricate carvings and banishing the shadows. A pulse of light rippled from the token into the stone, and a soft crack reverberated as the relief shifted. The figure's hand moved, releasing the token as if it were handing it back to Emrys. A voice singular now, low and resonant filled the space. "Emrys Corbin of Windmere, you have embraced the gift. The spirits of the forest acknowledge your will. Now journey to the Sister Stones, where the first trial awaits. There, you will choose, power for yourself or service to the land that sustains us all." In that moment, whispers fluttered through the chamber like a murmuration of wings. The mossy runes along the walls glowed softly, guiding Emrys toward a narrow passage to his right. As the wind settled and the chamber's energy calmed, Emrys rose unsteadily to his feet, the carved token warm in his hand. He picked up the cold brass lantern, its blue flame rekindling with a soft sigh as he lifted it. The passage ahead was dark and narrow, but now illuminated by a faint, radiant glow seeping from the walls. Emrys set his jaw. His life among the barley and flax had taught him patience and perseverance. Now, those same virtues would carry him through this crucible. One step at a time, he moved deeper into the living stone, the carved whisper echoing behind him, "Service before self, for the forest's heart must beat in harmony with your own." As he traversed the winding corridor, Emrys felt the world shift beneath his feet, no longer the boundary of Windmere, but the threshold of legend incarnate. Ahead lay the Sister Stones and the promise of trials to test his courage and his compassion. Whatever awaited him there, he would meet it head-on, brandishing the Sita's gift and the resolve of a humble farmer called to deeds beyond imagining. Thus concluded the second episode of Emrys' saga, from the familiar comfort of furrowed fields to the hidden sanctum of ancient power. His journey had begun in earnest. The path ahead was uncertain, but the token in his hand and the whisper in his heart would light the way through shadow and trial alike and shape the man he was destined to become. Emrys Corbin emerged from the narrow passage into a cavern lit by phosphorescent moss that glowed in hues of emerald and sapphire. He stood in a broad chamber, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadow, supported by columns of living cedar that had somehow rooted into the stone floor. Between two great pillars lay the Sister Stones, towering slabs of pale granite carved into the shape of twin faces, one with eyes closed in meditation, the other with eyes wide in vigilance. At their base, a shallow pool of crystal clear water reflected the runes etched around the rims, shimmering like liquid moonlight. He set the brass lantern beside the pool, its blue flame dance mirroring the glow of the moss. The whisper returned, resonant and solemn. "Here you choose, Emrys of Windmere, ascend on the wings of personal power, or deepen your bond with land and people. Only one path may bear your heart." Emrys' pulse thrummed. He recalled Master Ulrich's words, "Service before self," yet part of him yearned to prove his worth, to claim recognition beyond the fields he had known all his life. He knelt by the pool, examining the runes. Along one side was inscribed strength, glory, command. Along the other, kindness, stewardship, harmony. The tongues of words shimmered as though alive, inviting him to speak. Before he could decide, the waters rippled, and a figure rose from the pool. A woman dressed in a flowing robe of woven reeds stood on the water's surface. Her hair was long and dark as wet soil, her eyes the color of new leaves. In one hand she bore a carved gauntlet of cedar wood, in the other, a woven basket brimming with grain and saplings. "Bearer of the Sita's gift," she intoned, voice like wind through leaves. "To claim the gauntlet of dominion, speak the words of strength and lift it from the stone. To wield the harvest's bounty, speak words of compassion and touch the earth at my feet." She gestured to two objects resting on raised plinths beside the stones, a gauntlet carved with twisting cedar branches, and a wooden chest engraved with the image of ripening wheat. Emrys rose, heart torn. He stepped first toward the gauntlet, fingertips brushing its cool surface. A tingle lanced through his arm, and the cavern seemed to pulse in anticipation. He heard a chorus of voices chanting strength, command, dominion. The gauntlet hummed, beckoning him to slip his hand inside. For a fleeting moment, Emrys imagined himself raised on a pedestal before adoring crowds, wielding that power to bend armies and harvest glory for his name. Then the whisper rose again, "Service before self." His vision blurred with memories of the villagers who had labored beside him since childhood, bent backs straightened by laughter, hands calloused but generous, faces lit by communal feasts beneath open skies. He remembered mothers offering leftover bread to strangers, children planting acorns for distant harvests, and the silent dignity of a farmer who worked in rain and sun alike. In that instant, his decision crystallized. Emrys released the gauntlet. The haunting glow faded, and the chorus of strength dissolved into silence. He stepped instead to the wooden chest. Kneeling, he placed a palm on its carved surface and spoke softly, "I choose compassion, stewardship, harmony." The basket in the woman's hand brightened, and she moved to the chest. With a graceful motion, she lifted the lid to reveal its contents: handfuls of golden grain, packets of wildflower seeds, and saplings whose roots glowed faintly. She dipped a hand into the pool and sprinkled water over the grain, causing it to sprout instantly into tiny stalks that swayed as if caught in a gentle breeze. "There," she said, lifting Emrys's chin with one finger. "You have chosen the path of giving, to nurture rather than subdue. Take the harvest's bounty, and let your heart guide the growth of land and people." Emrys accepted a packet of seeds, their kernels luminous. The cavern filled with the warm scent of earth and rain. As he stood, the sister stones trembled, and the runes around the pool glowed an opal hue. A deep rumble rolled through the chamber, and the distant sound of rushing water echoed from somewhere below. "It is done," the woman declared. She faded back into the pool, her robes dispersing in ripples that vanished into stillness. The pool's surface stilled, and the sister stones settled into silence, their twin faces reflecting opposite paths, now balanced by Emrys's choice. Suddenly, stone likenesses of creatures, the deer, the fox, the heron, materialized along the walls. Their carved eyes shone with life. A great stag stepped down from its pedestal, antlers like branching boughs, and bowed its head to Emrys. The stag's eyes gleamed with intelligence. "You have proven your heart," it spoke in a voice that resonated like hoofbeats on moss. "As steward of Windmere, you bear our blessing. Yet the trial is not complete. A wound festers in this land, deep as the river's source. To truly serve, you must journey to the Black Fen and heal its poisoned waters, lest the sickness spread to every brook and blade." The cavern darkened, and from the topmost columns of cedar, droplets of resin fell, plinking into the pool. The water's glow pulsed once, then faded completely, leaving only the phosphorescent moss and the pale stones as lanterns in the gloom. The stag's form shimmered and vanished, but his final words echoed in Emrys's mind: "Find the heart of the fen. Restore the flow. Prove your words with deeds." Emrys retrieved his lantern, pressing the seed packet into his satchel beside the carved token. The air hummed softly, as though the cavern itself exhaled relief. He turned to the narrow passage from which he had entered, but there was no stair, only a descending tunnel cut into living rock, faintly illuminated by veins of glowing green. A current of cool air rose from below, carrying the scent of peat and decay, mixed with the promise of rebirth. With steady resolve, Emrys set his foot on the first step. The path wound downward through twisted roots that pulsed with arcane light. Flickers of movement danced at the edge of his vision, copper beetles that glowed like embers, and tiny birds of stone whose wings seemed poised for flight. The air grew damp and cold, droplets falling from the ceiling like tears. He gripped his cloak tighter and pressed onward, recalling Master Ulrich's lesson, every great journey begins at home. Now he understood that home was not merely the village of Windmere, but the living land itself. As Emrys descended, he felt a surge of purpose. The harvest's bounty nestled in his satchel was a promise of new life, the Cetus gift pulsed in his heart. Ahead lay the Black Fen, a place of sickness and shadow but also of potential healing. He would carry seed to water, compassion to darkness, and prove that true strength grew not from dominance, but from the quiet acts of tending and care. The final step descended into complete darkness. Emrys raised his lantern high, the blue flame flickering against the damp walls. Beyond lay a low, vaulted chamber, and at its center, a fissure in the rock glowed with sickly green light. Water dripped from above into a murky pool that rippled with poison. This was the wound that threatened all life in Windmere's rivers. Emrys swallowed hard, steeling himself for the ordeal ahead. He knelt by the edge, uncorked the packet of seed, and whispered a prayer of hope. May these seeds take root in cleansing waters, and may the land forgive me my doubts. He sprinkled the golden grains into the poisoned pool. The seeds sank, glowing briefly before settling on the slime-covered stones. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the pool trembled. A hiss of steam rose as the sickly green light brightened to brilliance, and the pool convulsed. Emrys leapt back as a wave of hot mist blasted upward, erasing his footprints on the stone floor. The ground shook, and fragments of rock rattled loose overhead. When the tremor subsided, the pool's surface was still but no longer murky. Instead, it shimmered like polished obsidian with veins of bright algae coursing beneath. A faint pulse of clear water broke its surface, sending ripples outward that caressed the stones. The hiss turned to a soft murmur of life returning. Emrys let out a breath he did not realize he'd held. The cavern grew silent and still, the first silence he had truly heard since the storm began. He rose unsteadily, heart thundering in his chest, and stared at the revitalized pool. Above, the carved symbols on the columns glowed gently, blessing the renewal. "You have done well, Steward," the whisper sighed, gentler than ever. "Return to Windmere, may its fields flourish, its people know peace, and its streams run clear. Your path is but beginning." Emrys slung the lantern over his shoulder, the carved token warm against his heart. With the seed of restoration planted in poisoned depths, he retraced his steps upward, leaving behind a land reborn and carrying within him the humble strength of service. Thus concluded the third episode of Emrys Corbin's saga. From choosing compassion over power to healing the Black Fen, he proved that true heroism springs from nurturing the world, not conquering it. Ahead lay greater trials, darker challenges, but now Emrys carried the living heartbeat of the land itself as guide and ally, shining a light in the deepest shadows. Emrys Corbin emerged from the vaulted chamber of the Black Fen into a world reborn by dawn's first light. The carved token at his chest was warm against his tunic, and the brass lantern, its blue flame extinguished long ago, had been set aside on the cavern floor. He looked up at the tree-lined tunnel where he had descended, now a silent witness to his triumph, and took a deep breath of crisp air that smelled of peat and fresh rain. Above him, the forest canopy parted to reveal a pale wash of sunrise, gilding the mossy stones in soft gold. With each step back toward the surface, Emrys felt the pulse of the land quicken around him. The roots that had twisted along the corridor glowed faintly, as though recognizing their steward's success. Small creatures, stone-carved birds and luminous beetles stirred in the underbrush, their forms flickering like waking spirits. As he climbed the final stretch of roots, the air grew warmer and perfumed with budding blossoms, a promise that winter's grip had finally loosened. At the mouth of the tunnel, Emrys paused. A ribbon of mist clung to the forest floor, swirling around his boots like playful fingers. He closed his eyes and listened. Somewhere beyond the cedars, a brook sang with renewed vigor. High above, a lark poured its heart into the morning. The world was waking, and he had given it reason to rejoice. Emrys stepped onto the damp earth, brushing a fern frond from his cloak. Beyond the circle of ancient cedars lay the barley fields of Windmere, still heavy with dew. He recognized the bend in the furrow where he had discovered the carved token, and the wooden poles marking the boundary between village and forest. The moment he crossed that line, a chorus of distant cheers echoed across the land. He hurried forward, boots sinking into soft soil, until at last the silhouette of Windmere appeared through the mist, a cluster of thatch-roofed cottages, smoke curling skyward, and beyond them, the grand oak where villagers gathered for feast and festival. A banner of woven reeds fluttered over the main clearing, bearing the emblem of a cedar sprig entwined with sheaves of wheat, the symbol of Emrys' stewardship. Women hung garlands of wildflowers along fences, children danced around a maypole, elders sat on wooden benches, nodding in approval as they surveyed the revival of their home. Emrys, you did it? Came a shout, and then a crowd spilled out of the cottages to greet him. His mother, her hair streaked with silver, rushed forward, tears glistening in her eyes. She enveloped him in a fierce embrace. My son, you've saved us all. He stood quietly as she clung to his shoulders, his heart swelling with humility. It was never just my doing, Mother, he said. The land guided me, and so did you. Around them, villagers pressed closer, offering cups of mead, baskets of fresh bread, and bouquets of spring blossoms. Emrys accepted each gift with a nod, his gaze sweeping over the joyous faces. Blacksmiths heft hammers in salute, bakers proclaimed sweet pastries born of fertile wheat, the miller pointed to the windmill's turning sails, now free from the plague of rot. Emrys realized that his trial beneath the earth had rippled outward, healing not only the poisoned pool but the heart of every stream that fed their fields. Children danced at his feet, weaving around him in a ring. A little girl plucked a stray seed from his satchel, pressing it into his palm. Here, she said, a gift for you, keeper of the seeds. Emrys smiled and tucked it away, thinking of the harvests yet to come. Master Ulrich appeared at his side, leaning on his staff but standing tall with pride. You returned with the light of the forest in your eyes, he said quietly. Now the people look to you for guidance. Emrys followed the elder's gaze to the banner strung above the clearing. The emblem glowed softly in the morning sun. "What comes next?" he asked. The elder nodded toward the pavilion draped in green cloth, where a long table bore maps and scrolls. "We convene the Council of Windmere," Master Ulrich said. "The Queen's envoy arrives today to request our aid in a matter that threatens more than our own fields." Emrys's brow furrowed. In his mind, he replayed the stag's words, "A wound festers in this land, heal its poisoned waters." Now, responsibility spread beyond Windmere's borders. He stood straighter. "Then we shall meet this envoy and offer what we can." They crossed the clearing, the throng parting respectfully. At the edge of the pavilion, Emrys noticed the Queen's herald, a tall woman clad in azure robes, her silver hair braided like a river of moonlight. Beside her, 2 knights in polished armor held a chest bound with golden clasps. Behind them, a small retinue set up a canopy of silk bearing the crest of the Sapphire Isles. The herald bowed gracefully. "Steward of Windmere, I am Lady Anviel, emissary of Queen Callan. She sends greetings and gratitude for your healing of the Black Fen. Yet her realm suffers its own scourge. The pearl-white springs that feed the Sapphire Isles have turned blood red, and magic we cannot comprehend seeps through the stones, poisoning fish and felled ships alike." A murmur rippled through the villagers. Emrys exchanged a glance with Master Ulrich, whose eyes were grave. "We will help," Emrys declared. "Windmere's healing doesn't end at our borders." Lady Anviel's eyes shone with relief. She presented him the golden-bound chest. Inside are crystal vials of the poisoned spring water and a fragment of coral enchanted by the Isle's druids. "They believe that, as steward, you may possess the gift to cure what ails our waters." Emrys accepted the chest, its weight firm in his arms. "Bring your druid," he said. "We shall set out at first light tomorrow." The herald inclined her head. "The druid is named Lysandriel. She waits beyond the oak grove, near the silver stream." As Lady Anviel spoke, Emrys turned his gaze toward the oak where he had first learned of his destiny. The trees stood tall, their branches brushing the sky. Beyond them, the rolling fields of barley and flax shimmered gold. He took a breath, grounding himself in the soil that had made him. That night, the entire village celebrated under lanterns hung in the trees. A long table groaned beneath platters of roasted venison, honey-glazed turnips, and steaming loaves of spiced bread. Minstrels played flutes and fiddles, dancers spun in festive abandon. Emrys sat at the head of the table beside Master Ulrich and Lady Anviel, sharing tales and laughter. Yet beneath the warmth, Emrys felt the quiet stir of resolve. His path extended beyond these borders, and the road ahead would test him as deeply as the trials beneath the cedars. When the last song had faded and the villagers swayed with contented sleep, Emrys stepped outside the pavilion. The moon hung low and silver above the clearing, and the air smelled of jasmine and possibility. In the stillness, he touched the carved token and whispered a vow to the sleeping land. "At dawn, we heal the Sapphire Isles," he said softly. and may every wound in this world find its cure, one seed at a time. Thus concluded the 4th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga, his return to Windmere, the celebration of renewal, and the dawn of a new quest that would carry him beyond the fields he once called home. The gift he bore would guide him onward, toward distant shores and deeper trials, but always with the steadfast heart of a steward determined to sow hope wherever darkness lingered. The following dawn broke in a symphony of soft gold and rose light, as Emrys Corbin stood at the edge of Windmere's oak grove, the morning mist curling around his boots. The golden-bound chest rested at his feet, its brass clasps gleaming in the newborn sun. Beside him, Lady Anviel adjusted the hood of her azure cloak, while Master Ulrich observed the horizon with solemn interest. From beyond the trees came a soft murmur of water. Windmere's silver stream, clear and pure, a testament to Emrys's triumph at the Black Fen. A slender figure stepped forward through the reeds by the stream's bank. Tall and lithe, she moved with the ease of someone at one with the land, her gown woven from moss-green linen stitched with runes of dew and moonlight. In her pale hands she held a wooden staff topped by a spiral of pearl-white coral. Emrys felt his pulse quicken. This was Lysandriel, the druid of the Sapphire Isles, whose magic had faltered before her poisoned springs. "Steward of Windmere," she said, voice as soft as reed-thin wind, "we meet at last. The Queen's herald spoke highly of your deeds beneath the earth. I am Lysandriel of the Coral Roots, a name given in honor of the life-giving reefs that cradle my home." She inclined her head, lips curving in a faint smile. Emrys bowed deeply. "Druid Lysandriel, it is my honor. My people have restored the Black Fen's waters with simple seeds and compassion. I hope we can bring the same renewal to your springs." Lysandriel's eyes, pale as opal, betrayed cautious hope. "The waters of my isles are entwined with the coral and sea spirits. When the springs turned crimson, we feared the ocean's heart had been wounded as well. I can lend you my knowledge of the old rites, but we must gather 3 sacred elements before the ritual can commence: a vial of pure rainwater, the sap of a cedar plucked at dawn, and a feather of the silver-winged heron that nests on Moonstone Cliff. Only then can we purify the poisoned flow." Emrys nodded, setting his jaw against the coming quests. Behind them, Lady Anviel gestured to 3 sturdy caravels, their sails trimmed in sapphire and white. "These vessels await, fitted for swift passage. You will sail under the banner of Windmere and the Sapphire Isles. I shall accompany you as envoy, that our kingdoms may stand united." The morning passed in a flurry of preparation. Emrys oversaw the loading of supplies, sacks of barley and flax seed to offer the islanders, barrels of fresh water drawn from the stream, and bundles of healing herbs gathered by the village healers. Lysandriel paced the shoreline, reciting incantations that caused the sea breeze to shimmer with kinetic energy. Master Ulrich remained silent, leaning on his staff, his grey eyes reflecting both pride and concern. When at last Emrys climbed aboard the central caravel, he turned to face Windmere's fields one final time. The villagers lined the dune where the oaks gave way to sand, waving banners and offering blessings. His mother stood at the front, hand raised in farewell, her eyes glistening with tears of pride. Emrys pressed his palm to his heart, sending a silent thou back to the home he had healed. Set sail. Lady Anviel commanded, and the crew unfurled the sails. The wind caught them like wings, and the caravel slid from the shallows into open sea. Emrys steadied himself against the rail, the salt spray kissing his cheeks. To his right, Lysandriel stood serene, humming a melody that stirred the waters below so that dolphins surfaced to escort them for a time. The voyage was swift, carried by favorable currents and the steady winds of early spring. By late afternoon, the shoreline of the Sapphire Isles beckoned on the horizon, jagged cliffs topped with shimmering white beaches, forests of twisted pines, and, at their center, a great waterfall, feeding into a lagoon the color of polished lapis. Yet as they approached, Emrys's heart sank. The waterfall's flow was tinged a deep crimson, bleeding into the lagoon and staining the sand below. He turned to Lysandriel. I see now why you feared for the ocean. The druid's face was grave. She raised her staff and whispered a word of the old tongue. A luminous ripple pulsed through the lagoon, revealing beneath the oily surface schools of fish floating lifelessly, their scales stained scarlet. A heavy silence fell over the caravel. The crew fell to work lowering small boats, and Emrys joined them, determined to gather the items needed. Their first task: pure rainwater. As the boats neared shore, dark clouds gathered overhead, an irony not lost on Emrys. He raised his arms, calling on the cleansing rain, and for a moment the sky wept gentle droplets. The crew set out shallow bowls and jars to capture the water, and Emrys murmured prayers of thanks as the rain collected, each drop glinting like polished silver. Next came the cedar sap. To the west towered a ridge of cedars that matched those of Windmere Tall, ancient giants whose bark pulsed with life. Emrys and two sailors climbed the rocky path, their boots clattering on stone. Reaching the grove, Emrys found the largest tree, its trunk white as a millstone. He placed a hand on the bark and felt its warmth, remembering his first trial by the sister stones. Retrieving a small blade, he carved a slit and held a flask beneath, watching golden sap drip in slow beads before capping it carefully. As he descended, he nearly stumbled over a crushed feather. It lay on the path like a pale dagger, and Emrys recognized its shaft, delicate quills with silver-black filaments, surely the feather of a heron. He pocketed it, resolved to find a living bird in the morning. But as he returned to the shore, he spotted the heron's silhouette against the lagoon's red waters, a solitary figure perched atop a jagged rock. The bird regarded Emrys with unblinking eyes, as if judging his worth. Then, without warning, clouds parted and a shaft of sunlight pierced the gloom, illuminating the heron's wings which glowed silver-white like polished bone. Emrys felt a surge of reverence. Approaching slowly, he spoke in hushed tones. "O guardian of the waters, grant me but one feather, that we may heal this poisoned land." The heron cocked its head, and Emrys extended his palm. For a breathless moment, the heron seemed to consider him. Then it dipped its head and plucked out a feather, offering it as a gift before taking flight across the crimson waterfall. Emrys caught the feather mid-air, heart racing with gratitude. The bird's wings beat once against the breeze, then it soared beyond sight, leaving behind ripples in the water that shimmered briefly with hope. With all three elements gathered, rainwater, cedar sap, hair and feather, Emrys returned to the central boat, where Lady Anviel and Lysandriel awaited. The druid's eyes glowed when she saw the flask of rainwater, the sealed vial of sap, and the gleaming feather. "You have pleased the spirits of earth, water, and sky," Lysandriel intoned. "Now we prepare the ritual." She motioned them to the dunes above the lagoon, where smooth sandstone steps led to a circle of standing stones etched with coral patterns. At its heart lay a basin carved from driftwood, its surface carved with spirals like tidal waves. Emrys knelt at the basin's edge while Lysandriel chanted. She poured the rainwater first, its clarity momentarily cleansing the basin. Next she added the cedar sap, which pooled like liquid gold. Finally, with great reverence, she placed the hair and feather atop the mixture. As the three elements melded, the basin glowed with iridescent light that pulsed like a living heartbeat. Emrys felt warmth flood his veins. He placed one hand on the basin's rim and pressed his other palm against the carved token at his chest. "By the steward's vow," he proclaimed, voice ringing across the dunes, "I bind these waters to the land's heart. Let all sorrow and sickness be washed away." A wind rose, swirling the mixture into a vortex of light. Waves of iridescence surged like tidal breath, extending across the lagoon. Emrys watched as the waterfall's crimson tone faded to pale pink, then to clear, crystalline flow. The lagoon's water shimmered to pristine sapphire, and the stranded fish below twitched, scales catching the sun before darting back into freedom. The dunes shook with the collective exhale of the island. Coral patterns along the standing stones gleamed, and in the distance, village bells rang as the inhabitants rejoiced at their restored springs. Lady Anviel embraced Lysandriel, tears of relief glinting on her cheeks. Emrys stepped back, letting the ritual's energy wash over him. He felt eyes upon him and turned to see the heron swoop low over the lagoon, its silver wings catching the light, then circle in triumphant arcs before disappearing toward the interior woodlands. Exhausted yet exhilarated, Emrys looked to Lysandriel. "The island is whole again," he said softly. "What now?" She smiled, the lines of worry smoothing from her face. "Now we celebrate, and then I shall show you the heart of Sapphire Isles, the coral groves beneath the waves, where the ocean's spirit lives. You have proven the strength of service, soon you will learn the depth of compassion that binds land and sea." As the sun rose higher, Emrys felt a surge of joy unlike any he had known. Together with Lady Anviel and Lysandriel, he watched the villagers gather at the lagoon's edge, dipping their hands into the cool, clear water, tasting life renewed. The peals of laughter and song rose like birdsong, echoing across the dunes and into the forests beyond. And so concluded the 5th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga. From Windmere's Oak Grove to the healing of the Sapphire Isles, he gathered rain, sap, and feather to cleanse poisoned springs, proving that the steward's gift shone brightest when wielded in humble service. Ahead lay the coral groves and ocean's heart, a journey yet deeper, into the mysteries of land and sea entwined. Emrys Corbin stood at the water's edge of the newly cleansed lagoon, the tide lapping gently at his boots as the villagers of the Sapphire Isles celebrated their restored springs. Behind him, Lysandriel gathered her robes of sea green linen about her, the carved coral staff pulsing with soft light. Lady Anviel lingered by her side, gazing out at the shimmering water with awe. Dawn's sun filtered through drifting clouds, setting the lagoon's surface ablaze in molten sapphires and rose gold, and Emrys felt a thrill at the adventures yet to come. "The ocean's heart lies beneath these waves," Lysandriel said, her voice low and reverent. "Beneath the coral reefs that fringe this isle, an ancient grove thrives, a living cathedral of stone and life. There, the spirit of the sea awaits you. Will you dive into the depths, Steward, and seek communion with that spirit?" Emrys nodded, recalling the words of the stag in the Sister Stones. Service required not only tending to land but honoring the balance between earth and water. He knelt at the sandy shore and removed his boots, wading into the gentle surf. The water was cool and bracing, tasting of salt and freedom. With each step he felt the pull of undertow and the steady rhythm of the waves, as if the sea itself beckoned him onward. Lysandriel followed, chanting a low incantation in the ancient tongue. A circle of phosphorescent plankton swirled at their feet, lighting their path like living lanterns. In moments, Emrys found himself chest-deep in water, the lagoon's far end rising into a curving arch of coral-encrusted rock. Beyond, he could glimpse the open sea, its depths a shifting tapestry of turquoise and indigo. "Hold fast to the staff," Lysandriel instructed, fitting the carved coral atop her staff into a harness before attaching it to Emrys's belt. "Its magic will guide you through the currents and shield you from the ocean's trials. Breathe steadily, trust the sea, and let your heart, your stewardship, light the way." Emrys exhaled and dove beneath the surface. The world above dissolved into rippling light and muted sound, a realm of weightless motion and fluid grace. Salt water filled his ears, and the recorded pulse of distant waves beat through his chest. As he sank, the phosphorescent plankton clustered around him, creating a halo of pale blue glow. He passed through strands of kelp that brushed his cloak like feathered fingers, then emerged into a sunlit chamber beneath the waves. Here, coral formations rose like columns, pink, red, and white, twisting upward to filter beams of daylight into glowing pillars. Schools of fish darted in kaleidoscopic shoals, and slender sea turtles drifted lazily between anemones that quivered like living flowers. At the center of this living cathedral stood a great coral tree, its branches branching into fractal patterns, encrusted with pearls and sea fans. The tree's trunk was a smooth spiral of ivory and rose, and nestled at its base was a glowing orb of liquid light, the heart of the sea. It pulsed in steady rhythm, each beat sending ripples through the surrounding corals and casting prismatic fragments of color across the cavern walls. Emrys approached reverently, each motion slowed by the water's embrace. He stretched out his hand toward the orb, the carved token at his chest warmed in response, its spiral rune brightening like a beacon. A gentle current swirled around him, as though the sea itself approved his approach. Then, the orb's light intensified, and a voice like the echo of crashing waves filled his mind. "Steward of land and healer of streams, you have honored the balance between earth and water. Will you pledge to protect the ocean's heart, to shield it from poison and greed, as you have done for Windmere and the Sapphire Isles?" Emrys closed his eyes, breathing steadily through his nose. He recalled the barley fields under morning mist, the poisoned fen, the red springs, and now this cathedral beneath the waves. He thought of every drop of rain he had collected, every sapling he had planted, and every word of compassion he had spoken. With conviction, he replied in his mind and in the silent depths aloud, "I pledge my life to the service of land and sea alike. My heart is joined to the pulse of earth and ocean. I will guard the balance, so that all life may flourish." The orb pulsed thrice in response, and its radiant light washed over Emrys. For an instant, he felt himself hollower than the ocean's core, then overflowing with its boundless energy. The coral tree's branches glowed in tandem, and the surrounding pond of water shimmered with revived life. Tiny sea orzes circled his legs, starfish clung to his boots, and the fish shoals spiraled upwards, forming a column of living color. When the light subsided, Emrys found the orb nestled in his hands. Though he still stood in water, he felt no weight. Instead, a buoyant strength filled his limbs. The runes on his carved token now radiated a soft aquamarine hue, and the orb's glow mingled with the spiral rune, as though they were two halves of a single gem. The orb's surface rippled, revealing within it scenes of ocean life, kelp forests swaying in currents, whales breaching like mountains of water, and coral polyp colonies blossoming in iridescent blooms. Lysandriel rose beside him, her staff glowing in harmony with the orb. She pressed a hand to Emrys' shoulder. "The heart of the sea is yours to protect. Let its power guide your stewardship, and may its spirit dwell within you wherever you roam." Emrys nodded, cradling the orb close to his chest. He looked around at the living cathedral, its every creature and coral formation shimmering in grateful tribute. Then, with one final breath, he rose and swam upward, the orb's light leading him like a lantern through the water. Breaking the surface, Emrys gasped in the cool dawn air, water cascading from his hair. On the shore, villagers watched in awe as he emerged carrying the glowing orb. Lady Anviel stepped forward, her eyes wide. "You have done it," she whispered. "You have taken the ocean's heart." Emrys wrapped the orb in a cloth lined with seaweed, securing it against his chest beside the Cetus gift. Around them, the lagoon's waters pulsed in response, each wave carrying the orb's healing energy across the cove. Fish leapt joyfully in the shallows, crustaceans scuttled along the sand, their shells glinting in renewed luster, and the sea breeze carried a fresh tang of promise. As Emrys stepped onto solid ground, Lysandriel began to chant a closing blessing, and the villagers gathered in reverent circle. The heart of the sea's glow softened to a serene aquamarine as the ritual concluded, and Emrys felt its presence settle into his bones, a reminder of the bond he now shared with both land and water. That evening, a grand feast was held at the headland overlooking the ocean. Torches were lit along the cliffs, and banners of coral pink and sapphire blue flapped in the sea breeze. Emrys sat beside Lady Anviel and Lysandriel on a dais carved of driftwood. Bowls of fish stew, seasoned with herbs from the inland forests, steamed on rush mats, platters of sweet seaweed cakes and salted spiced meats lined the long tables. Minstrels played harps made of conch shells, and dancers wove ribbons in swirling patterns that echoed the currents below. Amid the celebrations, Emrys allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He watched the twin moons rise above the horizon, one pale silver, the other a shimmering blue casting twin reflections on the water. He thought of Windmere's barley fields and the Black Fen's life-giving waters, of Sapphire Springs and the Coral Grove's silent cathedral. Each had tested him in a different way, and each had deepened his resolve to serve. Master Ulrich appeared at his side, leaning heavily on his staff. "Your journey has carried you far beyond our little village, Emrys," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You have become a true steward of world and wave. But remember this, the greatest challenge lies not in trials run or waters healed, but in guiding the hearts of others to share your vision. The balance you uphold now depends on every hand willing to tend the land and guard the seas." Emrys nodded solemnly. "I understand, Master Ulrich. The gift is not mine alone, it belongs to all who cherish this world. I will teach them, and together we will protect what we love." With that vow echoing in his heart, Emrys rose and lifted his cup of spiced mead. "To land and sea, to every living thing that we nurture and defend. May our stewardship be as enduring as the cedar and as boundless as the ocean's heart." 1,000 voices answered his toast, their cheers rising like waves beneath the twin moons. The fires crackled, the dancers whirled, and the sea sang its eternal song, celebrating not just the healing of poisoned springs and fen, but the forging of a steward whose heart spanned field and reef alike. Thus concluded the 6th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga, his descent into the living cathedral of coral, the acceptance of the ocean's heart, and the binding of land and sea through humble service. Ahead lay the forging of alliances, the spread of his vision, and challenges that would test not only his courage but the hearts of all those he sought to guide. Yet with the Ceda's gift at his chest and the heart of the sea in his hand, Emrys was ready to sow hope across every shore and field in his care. The morning light filtered through the oak grove as Emrys Corbin and his companions prepared to depart the Sapphire Isles. The heart of the sea, cradled in a woven chest lined with kelp, glowed faintly with aquamarine light at the prow of the flagship. Beside Emrys stood Lady Anviel, her cloak billowing in the sea breeze, and Lysandriel, whose coral staff hummed softly in unison with the orb's pulse. The villagers of the Isles had lined the shore for a final farewell, their faces aglow with gratitude and hope. As the flagship slipped from the shallows, dolphins leapt alongside the hull, their sleek bodies arcing in celebration of the restored waters. Weeks passed in companionable quiet as the three ships cut westward across the brine, relying on winds and stars to guide them. Emrys spent hours in the quarterdeck's warm midday light, studying maps spread across the captain's table. The coastal route would bring them past several key trading ports before turning north toward Windmere's estuary. Along the way, they planned to share the knowledge of land and sea stewardship, teaching farmers how to monitor water quality, showing fishermen how to harvest sustainably, and demonstrating simple rituals for renewing poisoned springs should they arise. On the third evening, the vessels anchored in the harbor of Greyhaven, a bustling port of whitewashed stone buildings and red-tiled roofs. Here, Emrys proposed a meeting with the city's council of merchants and guild masters. He and Lysandriel disembarked under banners of sapphire and cedar. Market stalls overflowed with salted fish, ripe citrus, and gleaming glassware. Merchants haggled loudly while sailors hauled barrels of wine and fish ashore. Lady Anviel escorted Emrys through the narrow streets to the council hall, a grand chamber where banners of trading houses hung alongside the city's crest, a seagull lifting a sheaf of wheat. Inside, the merchant Lord Baron and his counselors regarded Emrys with polite curiosity. After formal greetings, Emrys spoke of the Black Fen's revival and the cleansing of the Sapphire Isles. He described how simple seeds, rainwater, and the heron's feather had restored balance, and how the heart of the sea now guarded the ocean's heart against corruption. Lysandriel added the druidic perspective, that land and sea were two halves of a whole, and that neglect of one endangered the other. The council conferred in hushed tones. Finally, Lord Baron rose and extended a hand. Steward of Windmere, your wisdom glows as brightly as your artifacts. Greyhaven depends on both fields and fisheries for wealth. We pledge to form the Greyhaven Accord, a covenant to share your practices with our farmers and fishermen, and to guard our rivers as fiercely as we guard our wallets. Cheers rippled through the hall, and pens scratched upon parchment to seal the pact. Emrys and Lysandriel spent 2 days training farmers in the nearby fields, showing how to use simple water-testing herbs, how to plant willow cuttings to filter runoff, and how to hold community seed. Ceremonies to strengthen social bonds. They then visited the docks to demonstrate sustainable netting techniques and coral-friendly anchor practices. By the time they set sail again, Greyhaven's harbor bore new signs, a festival of carved cedar and coral icons, and workshops scheduled throughout the year to monitor both farmland and reef. The voyage north grew chillier as they rounded the craggy coast of Arundel. High cliffs gave way to rolling hills clothed in pine and heather. Storms lashed their sails, and Emrys discovered a new test of leadership, keeping morale high when the wind howled and the decks trembled. He spent long watches on deck, inspiring the crew with tales of Windmere's fertility, Sapphire Isle's revival, and Greyhaven's accord. By candlelight, he read letters from Master Ulrich describing how the villagers had planted grooves along streams to catch silt, and how children had begun carving miniature tokens of cedar as good luck charms, replicating Emrys's first trial. At last, the estuary of the great river came into view, a wide expanse of silver water flanked by green fields and distant oaks. 3 longships of Windmere's design lay at anchor beside the arriving fleet, awaiting their steward's return. On the grassy shore, villagers gathered with banners and drums, young children danced with ribbons of wheat, elders offered bowls of barley porridge laced with honey, and the blacksmith hammered out a new sign for the steward's hall, proclaiming harmony through service. Emrys stepped ashore to a roar of celebration. His mother embraced him once more, and Master Ulrich greeted him with a firm clap on the shoulder. You have woven alliances across 3 kingdoms, the elder said, pride shining in his storm-gray eyes. Now Windmere grows into a beacon for land and sea alike. Yet Emrys's mind was already turning toward the next council, the gathering of Windmere's leaders beneath the great steward's oak. He appointed Lysandriel and Lady Anviel as honorary counselors, their expertise vital to the village's future growth beyond its borders. Together, the returning party processed through the village, offering the heart of the sea to the steward's hall and placing it upon a carved dais beside Master Ulrich's old leather chair. Beside it, they displayed the carved token and the gauntlet of dominion, though always unclaimed, reminding all that power without service remained unused. As dusk fell, the steward's hall filled with farmers, sailors, merchants, and healers alike, each bringing questions about the wider world and how Windermere might aid distant lands. Emrys rose at the dais, the lantern at his side now containing a fragment of sea glass that glowed gently in the hall's hearth fire. He addressed the assembly. "My friends, our journey has shown that every brook, field, and reef is but a thread in the tapestry of life. We have healed poison with seeds and tears, we have cleansed springs with water and song, we have pledged to guard our coasts with care. Now I ask you, will Windermere stand as steward not only of our own fields, but of every land and sea that seeks balance?" A hush fell. Then Master Ulrich rose, voice cracking with age and conviction, "I pledge my staff to this cause." Next, the miller spoke of preserving rivers, the fisher folk pledged sustainable nets, the bakers vowed to bake bread for distant councils, and the weavers promised banners of unity for every port and hamlet that sought Windermere's counsel. One by one, the villagers affirmed their role in what Emrys named the Steward's Concord, a commitment to share knowledge, to offer aid, and to safeguard the balance wherever needed. Emrys felt a swell of emotion as the hall echoed with vows of service. He recalled the simple meal beneath the cedar tree, the humble seed dropped into poisoned fen water, the offering of a half-eaten lunch to tireless ants, a small gesture that had sparked his entire quest. Now Windermere's humble legacy had grown into a network of stewardship spanning kingdoms. That night, under a sky freckled with stars, Emrys walked beyond the hall to the riverbank. The moonlight danced on the water, and in the hush he thought he heard faint whispers of cedars swaying, of waves breaking on distant shores, of distant fields awaiting the first spring rains. He pressed his hand to his heart, where the carved token and coral orb lay nestled together, and whispered a vow only the night could hear. As long as the earth and sea endure, so shall our promise. In every seed planted, every drop of water purified, every creature respected, the steward's gift lives on. From this humble village, we stand as guardians of balance, land and sea, side by side, heart to heart. A single star flickered overhead, as though in answer, and Emrys stood in the silence, ready for whatever new trials and triumphs the next dawn would bring. A fortnight after the Steward's Concord had been sworn, Emrys Corbin rose before dawn beneath the Steward's oak. The eastern sky was brushed with lilac and rose, and the air held the faint tang of coming rain. Around him, the banners of cedar and coral fluttered in the soft breeze, reminders of journeys past and oaths made. Yet this morning, a new summons weighed upon his heart. The Ashen Highlands lay to the north, a realm scarred by war and poisoned rivers, where a ruthless warlord known as Lord Bramber held sway. The cries of suffering fields trampled under siege engines, villages laid waste, streams choked with blood and soot had reached Emrys's ears, carried on the winds and whispered in council chambers. Now, as steward and herald of balance, he must venture into the heart of conflict and attempt the greatest trial of all, to forge peace where steel and fire reigned. Lady Anviel and Lysandriel joined him at the grove's edge. The druid carried the coral orb, the heart of the sea, and a portion of cedar sap in a carved horn. The envoy bore a sealed scroll from Queen Callant pledging support if negotiation succeeded. Emrys had also donned a new symbol of his stewardship, a simple iron ring intertwined with a sprig of cedar, balanced by a curl of coral, worn on a leather thong against his chest. Are you resolved? Lysandriel asked, eyes soft as dawn light. The Ashen Highlands are steeped in anger. Their rivers run red with warfare. Your heart will be tested as never before. Emrys inhaled, steadying himself against the weight of what lay ahead. I am resolved, he said. Balance cannot bloom where blood still flows. If our concord is to hold, we must prove its power even in the crucible of war. They set out on the road north, joined by a small retinue, a handful of archers from Windmere, a contingent of Sapphire Isle mariners to guide them through river fords, and several ambassadors from Greyhaven. Their journey led them through rolling heather moors and past abandoned watchtowers topped with curling smoke, signs of Lord Brambur's scorched earth tactics aimed at denying supplies to his enemies. Each night's camp pressed home Emrys' purpose, community fires where he taught scouts to carry purification herbs for tainted water, and the recitation of the Concord's vows beside simmering pots of barley porridge. On the seventh morning, the high road crested a ridge overlooking the river Ildren. Below, charred timber and shattered wagons littered the banks, the water itself gleamed with an oily sheen tinged crimson. Villagers crouched at a dry spring, scooping dust to moisten cracked lips. Emrys dismounted and waded into the shallows, gingerly collecting water into his horn. He brought it to his lips. It tasted of iron and ash. His jaw clenched, and he pressed a hand to the heart of the sea at his side. The orb's aquamarine glow pulsed in empathy. Lysandriel knelt beside him, placing a feather of the silver heron harvested at Moonstone Cliff on the dry earth. This feather carries the promise of flight, of freedom from bondage. We will offer it as a symbol, peace born of compassion, not conquest. Emrys nodded. He raised his voice, carrying across the valley, people of the Ildren. I am Emrys Corbin of Windmere, steward of land and sea. I come bearing the vows of the steward's concord, an accord sworn to purge poison from earth and water wherever it festers. Bring forth your leaders, that we might speak and heal these wounds without further bloodshed. For a long moment, the only response was the caw of ravens and the drip of stagnant water. Then, from the shattered remains of a wagon wheel, a figure emerged, a soldier draped in a tattered banner of soot-black cloth, his sword stained from wading through the river. He carried a harp, its strings broken, its wood cracked. Emrys realized with a pang that the warlord's people had forsaken even music in their suffering. The soldier knelt at a distance, lowering his head. The warlord hears your words, steward, he rasped. But he answers only in fire and steel. If you wish to parley, meet him at the bridge of iron chains at dusk. Bring no guards, cloak your intentions in peace alone. Emrys exchanged a glance with Lady Anviel and Lysandriel. It was a perilous summons, an unguarded meeting under the gaze of a merciless lord, but one in keeping with the principles of service and trust. He nodded. We will come, he said firmly. May no harm befall those who seek the path of peace. At dusk, Emrys and his companions arrived at the iron chain bridge spanning the river's widest stretch. Towering spires of blackened stone flanked each end, their rusted chains creaking in the wind. Lord Bramber awaited them on the far side, seated upon a warhorse whose eyes glowed with unnatural light, enchanted, Emrys suspected, to carry the aura of menace. The warlord wore armor scored with battle, his face half hidden by a helm adorned with twisted horns of steel. In one gaunt-leafed hand he held the soldier's broken harp neck, the other rested upon a blood-stained blade. A frown etched across the warlord's lips, and his voice boomed, "Steward of Windmere, you bring no army, no shield brothers, no guarantee of safety. Why shall I not have you hanged from these chains for trespass?" Emrys bowed, offering the hair and feather on outstretched palms. "Lord Bramber, this feather is a gift of hope. We stand unarmed, that our hearts may be bared. I come to ask, will you spill another drop of blood, or will you stand with us to cleanse these waters and restore life to your people?" A tense silence stretched across the bridge. The warlord's horse stamped, splashing muddy water onto the iron links. Then Bramber's helm tilted, as though considering the question. He spoke again, voice low with menace and curiosity entwined. "I will listen, but know this, my people starve and burn. If you cannot deliver healing, you die here, and my river flows free of your meddling." Emrys met his gaze unflinchingly. "Grant me 3 nights, he replied. 3 dawns to draw blood from these waters, not with swords, but with compassion, ceremony, and the burdens of guilt laid to rest. If on the 3rd dawn the river still runs red, I will accept your verdict." Bramber lowered his gauntlet, the broken harp neck falling with a clang to the iron plates. 3 nights, he agreed. "I will grant your trial. Fail, and the hawks feast." He turned his horse, leaving Emrys and his small retinue to the bridge's center, the chains creaking like the breath of the valley itself. As word of the trial spread, villagers and soldiers alike gathered beside the river banks. Emrys oversaw the digging of channels that directed clean rainwater captured in barrels by Lady Anviel's envoys into the Ildren's main flow. Lysandriel and the druidic acolytes chanted ancient prayers as they scattered willow and alder cuttings along the banks, living filters to trap toxins and renew the currents. Through the night, Emrys joined hands with both villagers and Bramber's soldiers, inviting them to bear their grief into the ritual fires, confessing losses, and pledging to protect one another's hopes. On the 2nd dawn, the water had cleared in patches of pale garnet where it once swirled blood red. Fish stirred at the margins, and reeds bent in the current's gentle pulse. But as the sun rose higher, the river's headwaters farther upstream still poured crimson torrents, fed by runoff from slag quarries and trench runs. Emrys realized the root of the poison lay in the highlands mining and the forges of war. He petitioned Lord Bramber to tour the quarries. Reluctantly, Bramber agreed, riding alongside Emrys into the ash-choked hills. There, Emrys witnessed vast pits of exposed ore, steam rising from molten slag, and waterways stained by iron rust. The warlord's expression tightened as he regarded the scars. Emrys said quietly, "This war profits not warlords, but the stones themselves. If we seal these quarries and redirect the slag into healing cinder brick made of ash and moss, you may fuel your forges without poisoning the land." Bramber's gaunt-leafed hand clutched the broken harp. Slowly, he nodded. Tell me how, he demanded. Show me the way. Emrys smiled, relief and resolve warming him. Over the second night, miners and soldiers labored side by side under Lysandriel's guidance, mixing ash with sap and fungal mycelia that bound the particles. They constructed kilns that baked the mixture into porous bricks filters through which water ran clear. Simultaneously, Lady Anviel's envoys organized grain shipments to feed Brambur's people, ensuring no villager went hungry during the transition. On the third dawn, the river Ildren shimmered in unclouded silver beneath the rising sun. Brambur stood on the bridge, watching as children splashed in the shallows, fishermen cast nets for fat trout, and reeds bent gently in the revived current. He turned to Emrys, lifting the broken harp neck and placing it at the steward's feet, a gesture of surrender and trust. Emrys knelt and lifted the harp, its wooden frame now cleansed of ash by the new brick's filtrations. He strung fresh gut strings salvaged from fishing nets and plucked a cord that ran clear across the valley. Brambur approached and took the harp in his gauntlet, offering it back. Emrys shook his head. Keep it, he said. Let it sing hope rather than lamentation. Then, with a practiced hand, he strummed a melody of renewal rippling like clear water over stone. Brambur listened, tears gathering on the black-cheeked warlord's face. Around them, soldiers lowered swords and bussed their gauntlets in salute. The banners of soot black were replaced with simple swathes of cedar green. That day, the warlord's river was cleansed. Brambur signed an addendum to the steward's concord, vowing to govern his lands with stewardship and to honor treaties of peace. Emrys had faced the crucible of war not with blade, but with humility and service, and emerged victorious by proving that compassion could bind even the hardest heart. As dusk fell on the ashen highlands, Emrys, Lady Anviel, Lysandriel, and even Lord Brambur gathered to plant a single cedar sapling beside the river, a living testament to their covenant. Under the watchful stars, they sealed their bonds with a final vow, whispered in joint voices. In every war-ravaged vale, let compassion be the plough, in every poisoned stream, let service be the cleansing rain, and in every heart, let the steward's gift endure. Thus concluded the 8th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga, the trial of peace upon the warlord's river, where the steward's call to heal flowed stronger than any sword, and where even enmity bowed before the quiet power of service. The dawn mist curled around Emrys Corbin's boots as he stood once more beneath the steward's oak. Word had come from Greyhaven and the Sapphire Isles alike, villages nestled in the shadow of the Crimson Peaks were besieged not by armies, but by fire itself. A great WYRM known as Serenax the Emberheart had been driven from its ancestral lair by miners who despoiled the mountain's veins for precious ore. Its rage rained flames upon homesteads, and rivers ran hot with scalding waters. The steward's concord would be tested anew, this time against the fury of nature's mightiest sentinel. Emrys strapped the heart of the sea and the packet of golden seeds into his satchel, and Lysandriel affixed the cedar sap horn to her belt. Lady Anviel held a folded banner of the steward's accord, its emblem of intertwined cedar and coral ready to be raised as a symbol of parley. Before them also rode a small escort of Windmere archers, Sapphire Isle mariners, Greyhaven miners turned envoys, and Brambur's Highland scouts, each a living testament to alliances forged by service. The WYRM's lair lies high above the tree line, Lysandriel warned, her voice careful as the first bird calls of morning. Its heart is wounded as much as its home. If we can show compassion to its pain, perhaps we can restore the mountain's balance. Emrys nodded, recalling Brambur's trial by peace. True stewardship demanded empathy even for those who seemed enemies. Then we go not to slay, but to heal. Their journey led them through rolling heather pastures and into the foothills of Crimson Rock. Smoke hung low over charred clearings where farms once stood, ash drifted like snow. Emrys paused to scoop a handful of warmed earth into his palm, feeling its heat. He sprinkled seeds of barley and wildflowers into the soil, a gesture of hope amid ruin. The Highland scouts watched in silence, uncertain, then followed his lead, planting saplings in the scorched ground, each shovelful of earth a promise of renewal. By mid-afternoon they reached the high meadows, where a river of molten rock carved a glowing scar down the mountainside. The group halted at the riverbank, armored miners already at work constructing stone diversion channels to cool the flow. Emrys knelt, drawing fresh rainwater from his flask and pouring it carefully into the channels. A hiss of steam rose, and the flow slowed, its brightness dimming from fiery orange to molten amber. Yet far above, a shape coiled atop a alleged dragon's tail, flicking embers into the wind. Lady Anviel stepped forward, raising the banner. Cyrenax of the Ember Heart, she called, voice clear against the roaring stones, I am Lady Anviel, envoy of kingdoms bound by the Steward's concord. We come unarmed, bearing neither sword nor shield, but the promise of healing. Will you hear our plea? For a tense heartbeat, the dragon did not respond. Its massive wings folded against its scaled flanks, its eyes glowed molten gold. Then it reared its head, smoke billowing from nostrils like storm clouds, and unleashed the crackling roar that shook the valley, an echo of sorrow and pain. Emrys swallowed, moving forward himself, the banner in one hand, the carved token in the other. Cyrenax, he said softly, stepping into the creature's lair. Your home has been violated, your streams turned to molten tears. We offer atonement, not conquest. Grant us your voice, that we might learn how to mend what has been broken. The dragon's eyes flickered, and it lowered its head until its snout hovered above Emrys. A rumble, half grief, half anger, vibrated through the ground. Emrys knelt, bowing his head as the token at his chest began to glow with warm amber light, matching the dragon's ember hue. He closed his eyes and placed the token upon the cooled stones at his feet. In the hush, a voice filled Emrys's mind, not the whisper of the forest or the call of the sea, but the sorrowful lament of the mountain itself. He saw flashes of memory, children clutching dinners stolen by starving miners, nobles demanding more ore, the WYRM's ancient kin driven from hidden grottos. The WYRM's mind was a tapestry of pain and betrayal. Emrys exhaled, lifting his head. I pledge on the Steward's vow, he intoned, to restore your home and protect the balance between stone and flame. Tell us what you require. The dragon exhaled a plume of smoke, and where it touched, the stone at Emrys's feet cracked open to reveal a vein of obsidian inlaid with veins of gold. From that fissure, molten tears welled up, and the dragon dipped its snout into the pool. Then, with surprising gentleness, it pressed a single gleaming dragon scale against Emrys' palm, a scale glowing with inner fire. Emrys turned to Lady Anviel and held the scale aloft. "This gift I accept. We will forge a new covenant, to seal the mountain's veins against avarice, to filter its runoff through living stone, and to teach miners the rites of renewal so that ore may be drawn without bloodshed." He knelt before the scale and embedded it in the seed packet. The dragon scale's glow suffused the seeds with pulsating warmth. Then Emrys drew the cedar sap horn and emptied a single drop onto the crimson earth. It hissed and bubbled, transforming the ash into fertile black soil. Lysandriel began an incantation, and from the sky, rain fell cool and cleansing. Emrys scattered the special seeds across the high meadows, watching them sprout instantly into hardy grasses and crimson wildflowers that clung to the slopes like living quilts. Cyrenax watched, its golden eyes softening as the land around it revived. The molten river dimmed further, its glow reduced to a gentle ember. At last the dragon let out a low, rumbling sigh and coiled its massive wings around its body as if to sleep, its ember heart no longer driven by anguish but by peace. Emrys, Lady Anviel, and Lysandriel remained through the night, constructing living barriers of stone and moss that would channel excess heat into geothermal vents rather than ravine villages. They oversaw rituals that taught highland miners to carve the new living bricks, combinations of ash and moss like those first forged for Brambur's forges to line tunnels and prevent toxic runoff. By the third dawn, the crimson peaks stood renewed, no longer rivers of flame, but streams of warm mineral water fringed with moss. High above, Cyrenax soared in wide circles, its scales gleaming like burnished bronze, the mountains echoing with its triumphant cry. Below, villagers and miners gathered to witness the transformed land, offering the stewards a chord in gratitude and awe. Before he departed, Emrys planted a cedar sapling at the mountain's highest pass, its roots entwined with the living bricks and lava flows. He pressed the gaunt leaf stem of coral still unused, a reminder of power unclaimed, into the earth beside the cedar. Then, with a final bow to the great WYRM, he turned toward the valley, ready to carry the next lessons of service to new lands. Thus concluded the 9th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga, The Dragon's Lament at Crimson Peaks, where compassion quelled the fury of flame, and the steward's gift grew yet stronger, its roots deepened. In stone and fire, binding land and creature in a tapestry of healing. Ahead lay horizons uncharted, where the quiet acts of service would kindle hope in every corner of the world. Weeks had passed since the healing of Crimson Peaks. Word of Emrys Corbin's deeds had swept through the continent like the rising tide, his name whispered in the marketplaces of Greyhaven, sung in sea shanties by sapphire mariners, and carved into stone near Brambur's new kills. Yet with recognition came a new tide, rumors, half-truths, and a whispering unease that crept into the dreams of seers and sages alike. It was Master Ulrich who first summoned Emrys back to Windmere with urgency. The elder's letter, delivered by Falcon, bore a single sentence scrawled in trembling ink. The roots remember. When Emrys returned to Windmere, he found the oak groves quiet, not with peace, but with tension. The wind no longer rustled the branches in welcome. The river, though clean, ran with an odd stillness, as if watching. Children complained of strange dreams, voices calling their names from the woods, shadows where none should fall. Even the heart of the seat, resting in its cradle at the steward's hall, pulsed erratically, its glow flickering like a beacon lost in fog. Lysandriel stood at its side, hand pressed to the orb. Her face was pale. "There's something buried beneath Windmere," she whispered. "Older than the fields, older than the cedars. A memory sealed away. And now, it wakes." Emrys turned to Master Ulrich, who stood silent by the hearth. "In my youth," Ulrich began slowly, "before Windmere was fields and barley, this land was the site of a great convergence, a meeting of earth, sea, and sky. The ancients built a labyrinth beneath the roots of the steward's oak. They called it Carethinur, the hollow that remembers. It was sealed with runes after the breaking, when knowledge became too dangerous to hold. And now, something stirs in its depths." Emrys felt the carved token at his chest grow warm, the spiral rune humming softly. "I must descend," he said. "Whatever lies below, it calls for a steward's reckoning." That night, Emrys, Lysandriel, and a scribe named Ren, chosen for his knowledge of ancient runes, gathered at the base of the steward's oak. They traced the roots, following a whisper only the token could hear, until they found the opening, a narrow fissure in the earth veiled by ivy, sealed with 3 spirals carved in overlapping rings. Emrys pressed the token into the center, and the stone dissolved in a rush of warm air scented with old parchment and forgotten rain. They descended into darkness, guided by lanterns lit with hair and feather oil. The path wound deep, coiling like the rune on Emrys's chest. The deeper they went, the heavier the silence became, thick, pressing, filled with distant murmurs just beyond hearing. Runes etched into the walls began to glow faintly as they passed, some familiar, others ancient beyond recognition. At last, the tunnel widened into a vast circular chamber, its ceiling domed with black stone inlaid with silver filigree. In the center stood a monolith of obsidian, cracked and veined with pulsing amber light. Around it, 7 archways formed a ring, each leading into darkness, each flanked by statues of masked figures. The light from Emrys's lantern bent and rippled at the edges of the monolith, as if the air around it remembered a time before light was tame. "This is it," Ren whispered. "The echoing core. The heart of Carethinur. They say the ancients stored memory itself in these stones, and sealed their regrets." Emrys approached the monolith. The closer he came, the more clearly he heard it, not with ears, but in the mind. "Who tends the flame? Who bears the burden? Who remembers, when the world forgets?" "I do," Emrys answered aloud, placing his hand on the stone. The world shifted. Suddenly he stood not in the chamber, but a vision of Windmere as it once was, untamed forest, roaring rivers, stars burning above a field of standing stones. Around him, robed figures sang in a forgotten language, weaving cedar branches into braids and carving spirals into bone. The land pulsed with raw power. But then came fire, not Cyrenax's cleansing flame, but wildfire fed by greed and fear. He saw the first quarries torn open, trees ripped from their roots, rivers redirected. And he saw the ancients, their faces broken with sorrow, seal Carethinur to protect the last truth of their world. When the vision faded, Emrys knelt, heart pounding. They left this place not to hide power, he said, but to guard a memory, a warning. Ren stepped forward, pointing to the 7 archways. Each passage leads to a trial, he said, reading the runes above the nearest: remembrance, regret, reconciliation, responsibility, resolve, reckoning, renewal. You must walk them all to awaken the labyrinth fully. Without hesitation, Emrys turned to the arch marked remembrance and stepped through. He found himself in a forest of golden leaves, Windmere, but ancient, untouched. Shadows of people moved through the trees: farmers, druids, children at play. But none saw him. He moved like a ghost among memories, watching their joys, their sorrows, their hopes. He passed a family planting a cedar beside a newborn's cradle. A soldier returning home to find his fields burned. A druid sacrificing her life to purify a river. These were not legends, these were the true stories of the land, preserved not in scrolls, but in the bones of the earth. At the center of the forest stood a mirror pool. Emrys looked in and saw not himself, but every life that had passed through Windmere, one after another, rippling through the centuries. Tears ran down his cheeks. So many forgotten. So much given. And yet we remember only the victories. A voice whispered from the trees, a steward does not forget the cost of growth. Remember, so others may rest. Emrys took a single drop of water from the pool into a vial, sealing it with wax. Then he stepped back through the archway. When he returned to the central chamber, he held the vial aloft. The monolith pulsed in approval, and the rune for remembrance etched itself into the stone beside him. 6 trials remained. Lysandriel looked at him with a quiet reverence. The past cannot be changed, but it can be honored. Emrys nodded. And that's where healing begins. Thus concluded the 10th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga, the discovery of Carethinur, the labyrinth of memory, and the first step into a realm forgotten by time. As Emrys begins the 7 trials, he must reckon not only with the world's wounds but with the echoes of those who tried to heal it long before him. For in the roots of Windmere lies a legacy deeper than history, and only the one who remembers can carry it forward. Emrys Corbin took a steadying breath as he stepped through the 2nd archway of the labyrinth, marked with the rune of regret. The air grew heavy and cool, and the dim light of the central chamber faded into a twilight realm thick with mist and sorrow. The scent of damp earth and ancient wood filled his senses, mingling with faint echoes of voices half remembered. Before him stretched a winding path bordered by gnarled trees whose branches seemed to twist like grasping hands. Their leaves whispered with the voices of those who had lived and fallen in Windmere's long history. Shadows flickered between the trunks, figures caught in moments of loss, failure, and sorrow. Emrys stepped forward cautiously, the carved token at his chest humming softly as if to guide him. The path wound through scenes frozen in time, each a vision of regret: farmers who had failed crops, parents mourning lost children, warriors who had turned away from peace too late. The first vision unfolded beside a silvered pond, a young woman named Malin, clutching wilted barley in trembling hands, her eyes filled with tears. She whispered to the sky, "If only I had planted earlier, if only I had listened to the rains." Her sorrow radiated like a tangible weight. Emrys knelt, pressing his palm to the earth and sending warmth through the soil, a silent offering of forgiveness and hope. Further along, a soldier faced his own shadow, his brother fallen in a skirmish born of stubborn pride. The vision showed the soldier turning his sword away too late, his cry of regret echoing through the mist. Emrys closed his eyes, murmuring a prayer that their pain be eased and their lessons carried forward. Each vision confronted Emrys with the depth of human frailty, the consequences of choices made and chances missed. He felt the weight of generations upon his shoulders, not to condemn, but to heal. At the path's end lay a blackened altar, scarred with runes of warning and compassion intertwined. Emrys approached and placed his token on the stone. A soft glow enveloped him, and the shadows around shifted into a gentle light. From the altar rose a voice, clear, sorrowful, and ancient. "Steward, to carry regret is to bear the pain of growth. To forgive is to set the roots free. Will you bear this burden and carry it as your own?" Emrys nodded, eyes shining. "I will." The altar bloomed with ethereal light, and the rune of regret etched itself beside the monolith's glow. The path back to the chamber opened, and Emrys emerged, heart heavier yet lighter, a paradox of acceptance. Lysandriel waited, her gaze steady. To heal the world, one must first embrace its wounds. Emrys looked to the remaining 5 trials: reconciliation, responsibility, resolve, reckoning, and renewal, each a step toward wholeness. His journey was far from over, but with every trial, the steward's gift grew stronger, the threads of past and future weaving together beneath his steady hands. Thus ended the 11th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga, The Trial of Regret, where the echoes of loss taught the power of forgiveness, and the path toward healing became clearer. The labyrinth's shadows held many secrets, but the steward's heart was unwavering, ready to face the next challenge with courage and compassion. Emrys Corbin stepped with resolve through the 3rd archway of the labyrinth, its rune glowing softly as if welcoming him into the next chapter of his journey, reconciliation. The air shifted, warmer and tinged with the scent of blooming cedar and fresh rain. Before him lay a vast chamber filled with fractured mirrors and splintered stone, each shard reflecting moments of conflict, bitter disputes between neighbors, broken promises, and hearts hardened by pain. The labyrinth's walls whispered stories of estrangement, families divided over land disputes, villages torn apart by old grudges, and kinship shattered by misunderstandings left unspoken. Emrys moved slowly, his gaze tracing the faces caught in the reflections, some pleading for forgiveness, others wary, still clutching their wounds. In the center of the chamber, a cracked basin of water awaited. Emrys knelt beside it, retrieving from his satchel the vial of remembrance water gathered at the labyrinth's entrance. He poured it gently into the basin, and the shards shimmered and began to shift, realigning into a mosaic of light and shadow. A voice resonated through the chamber, warm, patient, and wise. To reconcile is to weave broken threads into new patterns. To mend is to embrace imperfection with grace. Will you become the weaver of peace, Steward? Emrys nodded, feeling the weight of countless fractured lives resting upon him. He took from his satchel a length of cedar bark and, with steady hands, began to braid it into a rope. As he worked, the shards of mirror reflected his determined expression, and one by one, they reassembled into a unified whole, a brilliant tapestry of intertwined lives, each piece shining in harmony. The chamber brightened, and a gentle warmth suffused the air. Emrys raised the braided cedar rope and laid it upon the basin's edge, a symbol of unity and strength forged through patience and understanding. Lysandriel appeared beside him, her voice soft yet firm. Reconciliation is the seed from which true community grows. It requires courage to face past wounds and wisdom to foster healing. Together, they chanted ancient words of binding and release, and the basin's water rippled with renewed life. Emrys felt the labyrinth's power flow through him, a current of forgiveness, acceptance, and hope. As the chamber's light dimmed to a serene glow, Emrys stepped back, the rune of reconciliation now etched brightly alongside those of remembrance and regret. The path ahead beckoned, the trials of responsibility, resolve, reckoning, and renewal awaited. Returning to the central chamber, Emrys carried with him a deepened understanding. Healing the land required mending the bonds between its people. Only through unity could the steward's gift fully blossom. Thus concluded the 12th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga, The Trial of Reconciliation, where broken mirrors reflected not just pain, but the promise of wholeness, and where the steward learned that true strength lay in weaving fractured lives into a resilient community. With courage and grace, Emrys prepared to face the next trials, his heart steady and his purpose clear. Emrys Corbin took a steady breath as he approached the fourth archway in the labyrinth, its rune pulsing faintly, a silent summons to the trial of responsibility. The air grew heavy and charged, filled with the scent of rich soil and distant storms. As he stepped through, the chamber unfolded into a vast plain beneath a brooding sky, where the earth itself seemed to breathe beneath his feet. Before him stood spectral figures, farmers, hunters, healers, each carrying burdens both physical and unseen. A mother balanced a basket overflowing with grain, her arms trembling. A blacksmith heft a hammer stained with soot and sweat. A child clutched a broken toy, eyes wide with silent sorrow. They represented every soul who had toiled, sacrificed, and cared for the land and each other across generations. A deep voice echoed across the plain, "Steward, to bear responsibility is to carry not only your own weight, but the hopes, fears, and dreams of those you serve. Will you accept this burden, knowing it shapes not only your path but the future of all?" Emrys stepped forward, feeling the weight of unseen chains settle across his shoulders. He knelt beside the mother, gently lifting the basket and steadying her trembling arms. He reached out to the blacksmith, helping steady his hammer. To the child, he offered a hand, mending the broken toy with a touch that shimmered with the token's magic. With each act, the spectral figures smiled, their burdens lightening as if lifted by his compassion. The earth beneath them blossomed, wildflowers erupting in vibrant bursts, and the sky brightened, parting to reveal a sun that bathed the plain in golden light. Emrys raised his hands, and the rune of responsibility etched itself into the sky above, glowing like a beacon. Lysandriel's voice joined his in a chant of stewardship and care, weaving a tapestry of commitment that stretched beyond the labyrinth's walls. Emrys felt the profound truth settle within him: responsibility was not a chain, but a bond, a sacred trust between steward and land, between leader and people. As the vision faded, Emrys found himself back in the labyrinth's central chamber, the four runes of the trials glowing in unison. The path ahead led toward the remaining trials: resolve, reckoning, and renewal. With renewed purpose, Emrys Corbin prepared to continue his journey, bearing the weight of responsibility with humility and strength, ready to nurture the seeds of hope in the soil of the future. Thus ended the 13th episode of the saga, The Trial of Responsibility, where the steward embraced the true weight of leadership not as a burden to bear alone, but as a shared promise to tend, protect, and uplift all life entrusted to his care. As Emrys Corbin passed through the fifth archway of the labyrinth, the atmosphere shifted once more. The rune of resolve glowed fiercely above the entrance, illuminating a narrow canyon filled with swirling embers and a sky streaked with the fiery hues of twilight. The air was thick with heat and the scent of burning cedar. Before him stretched a treacherous path flanked by jagged rocks and rivers of molten lava that hissed and sputtered. A voice, strong and unwavering, resonated through the canyon. "Steward, the path of resolve demands steadfastness in the face of fire and shadow. Will you walk through trials unbroken, guided by the unyielding flame of purpose?" Emrys tightened his grip on the carved token at his chest and stepped forward. The ground beneath him rumbled as the river of molten rock surged beside the path, threatening to engulf the narrow way. Flames licked at the edges, casting flickering shadows that danced like specters of doubt and fear. At the canyon's entrance, spectral figures emerged past stewards who had faced similar trials. Their eyes burned with determination as they recounted tales of hardship and perseverance. Emrys listened, absorbing their wisdom, and drew strength from their example. Midway through the passage, a wall of fire surged ahead, blocking his path. The heat was unbearable, and the flames seemed alive, crackling with ancient anger. Emrys closed his eyes, summoning the quiet fire within the steady burn of commitment and courage. He reached into his satchel and drew the heart of the sea's orb, its cool glow contrasting with the fiery inferno. Holding the orb aloft, Emrys began to chant the ancient words of balance taught by Lysandriel. Slowly, the flames around him shifted from roaring blaze to gentle warmth, forming a pathway of glowing embers that allowed him safe passage. The embers lifted into the air, swirling like fireflies before fading into the twilight sky. At the canyon's end, Emrys emerged onto a plateau bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. Here, the final inscription awaited, a testament to resolve etched into stone. Through fire unyielding, the steward's path is forged. Let purpose be your shield, and courage your sword. Emrys pressed his token to the stone, and the rune of resolve flared brightly, joining the others glowing within the labyrinth's core. Exhausted yet invigorated, he prepared to face the final trials, his spirit tempered like forged steel. Thus concluded the 14th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga, The Trial of Resolve, where the steward confronted the consuming flames of doubt and danger, emerging unbroken by the fire of unwavering purpose. With every step, Emrys moved closer to the renewal of the land and the fulfillment of his sacred charge. The labyrinth's air thickened as Emrys Corbin approached the sixth archway, the rune of reckoning pulsing ominously in deep crimson. Crossing the threshold, he was swallowed by a vast chamber shrouded in shadows that shifted and danced like living memories. The scent of smoke and earth filled the space, mingling with whispers, fragments of truths buried beneath layers of time and pain. Before him stretched a vast mirror, fractured by countless cracks yet reflecting a myriad of faces, some familiar, others distorted by anger, fear, and regret. The mirror pulsed with a haunting light, drawing Emrys nearer. As he gazed into its depths, scenes from Windmere's past and present played out, moments of joy and betrayal, growth and destruction, love and loss. The whispers grew louder, voices clamoring for acknowledgement. A spectral figure emerged from the mirror's heart, a woman robed in silver and shadow, eyes shining with sorrow and resolve. She spoke, voice both gentle and commanding, "Steward, the reckoning demands that you face the truth of yourself and those you serve. To lead is to bear the consequences of choices made and paths taken. Will you embrace the weight of this truth, and choose wisely the future you forge?" Emrys stepped forward, heart pounding. The mirror fractured further, and he found himself immersed within the vision's reliving moments of failure and success, witnessing the impact of his actions on the land and its people. He saw faces he had helped and those he had yet to reach, felt the pain of loss and the joy of healing intertwine. Struggling through the torrent of emotion and memory, Emrys realized that reckoning was not judgment but understanding, a call to own the past and wield it as a compass for the future. He raised his hand, touching the fractured glass. Light burst forth, mending the cracks and weaving the shards into a seamless whole. The chamber brightened, and the rune of reckoning etched itself in glowing crimson above. The spectral woman smiled and faded, leaving Emrys standing alone yet unburdened, carrying the wisdom of truths faced and choices made. Returning to the labyrinth's core, Emrys felt the weight of his stewardship deepen, a mantle heavier yet sacred. The final trial awaited, renewal, the promise of rebirth and hope born from courage and compassion. With a steadying breath, Emrys prepared to step through the last archway, his heart resolved to carry Windmere's legacy into the dawn of a new age. Thus concluded the 15th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga, The Trial of Reckoning, where shadows of truth and the weight of choice forged the steward's path, preparing him for the renewal that awaited beyond. The labyrinth's journey neared its end, but Emrys's true stewardship was only beginning. The final archway of the labyrinth glowed softly with the rune of renewal, casting a serene light that bathed Emrys Corbin as he stepped through. The air here was warm, carrying the scent of fresh rain and blossoming cedar, and the chamber opened into a vast garden, a living tapestry of vibrant colors and life. Flowers of every hue bloomed in delicate harmony, vines curled like whispered promises, and crystal clear streams wound through meadows of soft grass. In the heart of the garden stood the steward's oak, its branches reaching skyward, leaves shimmering with the golden light of dawn. Beneath its canopy, figures gathered, ancient stewards of the past, friends and allies made on his journey, and the spirits of the land itself. They welcomed Emrys with open arms, their eyes reflecting the hope and resilience of generations. A voice, gentle yet powerful, spoke from the oak's center. Emrys Corbin, you have walked the path of service through remembrance, regret, reconciliation, responsibility, resolve, and reckoning. Now, in Renewal, you shall plant the seeds of a future forged by the steward's gift. Emrys approached a carved stone pedestal before the oak, upon which rested a simple sapling, a new cedar, fresh and vibrant. He knelt, hands trembling with reverence, and planted the sapling in the fertile earth. As his fingers brushed the soil, the garden responded, the streams sang louder, flowers bloomed brighter, and the air thrummed with life renewed. Around him, the assembled spirits joined in a chorus of blessings, their voices weaving through the branches, carrying the promise of balance and harmony to every corner of the world. Emrys felt the heart of the sea pulse warmly at his chest, and the carved token glowed softly, a symbol that his stewardship now spanned both land and water, earth and ocean. Lysandriel stepped forward, her coral staff radiating soothing light. The steward's journey is eternal. As you nurture the sapling, so too must you nurture the bonds between all living things. Teach those who follow to honor the balance and to serve with humble hearts. Lady Anviel unfurled the banner of the steward's accord, raising it high. Windmere and its allies stand united not by power or conquest, but by shared commitment to healing and hope. Let this day mark the dawn of a legacy that will endure beyond all storms. Emrys looked around at the faces, those he had helped, those who had helped him, and those yet to come. His heart swelled with gratitude and resolve. The labyrinth had tested his spirit and forged his purpose, but the true journey lay ahead, guiding his people and allies to a future where balance reigned and the steward's gift flourished. As the sun rose higher, bathing the garden in golden light, Emrys spoke the steward's vow aloud, his voice steady and clear. By the earth beneath my feet and the waters that sustain us, I pledge to serve with courage, compassion, and unwavering resolve. To honor the past, heal the present, and sow the seeds of renewal for all who walk this land and sail these seas. The crowd echoed his vow, voices rising in unity. The steward's oak shimmered, its leaves cascading petals like stars, and the new cedar sapling took root with vibrant strength, an enduring symbol of hope and harmony. Thus concluded the 16th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga, Renewal, where the steward's legacy was planted deep within the soil of the world, and a new dawn blossomed for Windmere and beyond. With the labyrinth behind him and the future before, Emrys stepped into his role not just as guardian of land and sea, but as beacon of a lasting peace born from service, sacrifice, and love. With the renewal of Windmere's heart and the promise of a new dawn, Emrys Corbin stood at the threshold of a vast new chapter. The labyrinth's trials had forged his spirit, deepening his connection to land, sea, and the people who relied on their stewardship. But beyond the familiar forests and shores stretched uncharted realms, places where shadows threatened balance, where forgotten wounds festered, and where the steward's gift was needed most. Lady Anviel and Lysandriel stood beside him, the emblem of the steward's accord fluttering gently in the spring breeze. Together, they prepared a council, a gathering of emissaries, healers, warriors, and scholars from every allied kingdom. The purpose, to extend Windmere's legacy beyond its borders, creating a network of guardians who would uphold balance across the wider world. The great hall was filled with eager faces, each representing lands scarred by war, poisoned by greed, or lost to neglect. Maps sprawled across long oak tables, marked with territories where rivers ran black, forests lay silent, and communities struggled under the weight of despair. Emrys addressed the assembly, his voice carrying the steady resolve born of his trials. We stand at a crossroads where the steward's gift can heal not just a village or an isle, but the entire tapestry of our world. Together, we must forge bonds that transcend borders, share knowledge, and nurture hope. The path will be long, and the trials many, but united, we are stronger. Delegates pledged their support, and plans took shape. Caravans would carry seeds and saplings to barren lands, healers would teach rituals of water and earth purification, diplomats would mediate. Conflicts fueled by misunderstanding and fear. Emrys appointed trusted allies as regional stewards, charged with spreading the principles of service and balance. Yet even as they celebrated, shadows stirred on the horizon. Reports came of a growing darkness, an ancient blight awakening beneath the ashen highlands, threatening to undo the fragile peace wrought by Emrys' earlier trials. The earth trembled, and the rivers whispered warnings carried on the wind. Determined, Emrys set forth with Lysandriel, Lady Anviel, and a company of guardians chosen for courage and wisdom. Their journey took them through rugged mountains and whispering valleys, where they faced not only the blight's creeping corruption but also hardened hearts wary of change. In villages choked by decay, Emrys spoke of hope and renewal, offering seeds to plant and ceremonies to cleanse. In shadowed forests where the blight had warped trees into twisted forms, Lysandriel called upon ancient rites to heal and protect. Lady Anviel negotiated truces among wary clans, weaving alliances stronger than steel. Each step was met with resistance and doubt, yet also moments of profound connection, children laughing in newly planted groves, elders lighting candles for the steward's accord, warriors lowering swords to join hands in shared purpose. In the heart of the blighted region, Emrys confronted the source, a corrupted spring tainted by centuries of neglect and abuse. Drawing upon all he had learned, he combined the power of the Sita's gift and the heart of the sea, invoking the unity of land and water. Through ritual, song, and sacrifice, the spring's poison was drawn forth, purified by living stone and sacred waters. As the blight receded, life stirred anew, buds unfurling, streams running clear, and hope blossoming in the hearts of all. The journey continued, each new dawn bringing challenges and victories, forging a legacy that transcended time and place. Emrys Corbin, steward of Windmere, had become steward of the wider world, a guardian whose heart beat in harmony with the earth's pulse and the ocean's song. Thus concluded the 17th episode of Emrys' Saga, a testament to the power of unity, resilience, and the enduring spirit of service. The steward's journey was far from over, but with each step, the light of renewal spread further, guiding all toward a future where balance and hope reign eternal. As the seasons turned and the steward's legacy blossomed across the lands, a new challenge arose, one darker and more insidious than any Emrys Corbin had faced before. Far beyond the lush fields of Windmere and the crystalline shores of the Sapphire Isles, a gathering storm brewed in the forgotten corners of the world, threatening to unravel the fragile harmony the Steward's Accord had begun to weave. Reports came to Emrys from emissaries and scouts, villages deserted overnight, crops withering under unnatural blights, rivers running black as ink. Whispers spoke of a shadow spreading through the ancient forests of Elder Moor, where even the oldest trees groaned under a weight unseen. The air itself seemed to carry a warning, an urgent call for stewards to stand firm. In the great hall of Windmere, beneath banners of cedar and coral, Emrys convened a council of guardians. Faces from every allied kingdom gathered: wise druids, skilled warriors, learned scholars, and emissaries of distant realms. The chamber buzzed with urgency and determination as the reports were shared. "The balance we cherish is threatened," Emrys addressed the assembly, his voice steady yet heavy with the burden of leadership. "The shadows in Elder Moor grow, feeding on fear and neglect. We must act swiftly and united, or risk losing all we have fought to restore." Lady Anviel stepped forward, unrolling a map marked with sigils of dark blight and cursed places. "The darkness is ancient, older than any living memory. It feeds on division and despair, spreading like wildfire through forgotten wounds." Lysandriel added, her eyes grave, "To face such a foe, we must deepen our bonds not just between lands, but between hearts. Only through unwavering unity and sacrifice can we hope to stem the tide." Emrys nodded, feeling the weight of their words settle like stones upon his heart. He knew this trial would test the very soul of the Steward's Accord. Over the following days, plans were forged. Emissaries were sent to rally allies, armies prepared to defend the vulnerable, and healers trained to counter the creeping blight. Emrys led a contingent of the bravest guardians into the shadowed heart of Elder Moor, where the ancient trees whispered of forgotten sorrows. The forest was thick with decay-twisted roots, blackened leaves, and a silence that pressed upon the spirit. As they ventured deeper, Emrys felt the token's spiral rune pulse erratically, a beacon flickering in the dark. The heart of the sea, too, seemed subdued, its aquamarine glow dimmed by the surrounding gloom. Amid the shadows, a presence stirred: a dark figure cloaked in shifting mist, eyes gleaming with malice and sorrow. The embodiment of the blight, it challenged Emrys and his companions, testing their resolve and unity. Through trial and sacrifice, the guardians stood firm, channeling the power of the Steward's gift and the strength of their bonds. In a climactic confrontation, Emrys combined the light of the Seda's gift and the heart of the sea, invoking the ancient rites of renewal and protection. The darkness writhed but could not withstand the purity of their shared purpose. With a final surge of light, the blight was banished, and Elder Moor sighed with relief. Exhausted but victorious, Emrys and the council returned to Windmere, their spirits strengthened by the ordeal. They had faced the gathering storm and held the line, yet they knew vigilance was eternal. Thus concluded the 18th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga, a testament to the power of unity in the face of darkness, and a reminder that the Steward's path is never without shadow. But with courage, compassion, and unwavering resolve, even the deepest night gives way to dawn. The sun rose over Windmere, casting long golden rays that danced across the fields and through the ancient Steward's oak. After the dark trials of Elder Moor, the village pulsed with renewed life and hope. Emrys Corbin stood atop the gentle hill overlooking his home, his gaze stretching beyond the horizon where the Steward's Accord had blossomed into a network of healing and unity across kingdoms. Around him, the people of Windmere bustled with purpose: farmers sowing seeds in fertile soil, artisans crafting banners woven with cedar and coral, children learning the songs of stewardship, and healers tending to the sick with the knowledge gained from distant lands. The air was rich with the scent of earth and rain, the chorus of renewal echoing in every corner. Emrys knew the steward's journey was not his alone but a shared promise carried by many hearts. He convened a grand assembly beneath the great oak, where leaders from allied realms gathered to celebrate the steward's gift and plan for a future secured by collaboration and care. The hall was alive with vibrant discourse debates on sustainable harvests, water purification rites, and the integration of ancient wisdom with new knowledge. Emrys listened, guiding with humility and insight, ensuring every voice was heard. Lady Anviel and Lysandriel stood beside him, their presence a living symbol of the unity between land, sea, and people. Together, they forged the covenant of the new dawn, a binding oath to protect the balance of all realms, to share knowledge freely, and to nurture peace through service. The covenant's words were inscribed on a great stone tablet, its runes glowing softly in the evening light, a beacon for generations to come. As night fell, a festival erupted beneath the stars. Lanterns floated on the river, weaving trails of light like fireflies. Music filled the air, flutes, harps, and drums harmonizing in celebration. Emrys joined the dance, his heart light with the joy of a legacy secured not by power, but by the enduring bonds of stewardship. In a quiet moment, Emrys knelt beside the new cedar sapling planted years ago beneath the steward's oak. He traced its bark, feeling the steady pulse of life. The carved token and the heart of the sea rested nearby, symbols of a journey marked by trials, sacrifice, and unwavering resolve. He whispered a vow to continue the work of healing, to inspire future stewards, and to honor the sacred trust between all living things. Thus concluded the 19th episode of Emrys Corbin's saga, The Promise of a New Dawn, where the steward's legacy flourished in the hearts of many, and the world embraced a future shaped by compassion, unity, and hope. The path ahead was open, bright with possibility, and Emrys was ready to walk it, always a guardian, always a servant of the earth and sea. Though the trials of the labyrinth had ended and the covenant of the new dawn was forged, Emrys Corbin's journey was far from over. The steward's gift burned within him, a flame eternal, kindled by the love of land, sea, and the people he vowed to serve. Traveling from village to village, kingdom to kingdom, Emrys shared stories of renewal and stewardship, teaching others how to tend their fields and waters with care and respect. He listened to their tales of hardship and hope, learning from their wisdom as much as he shared his own. The carved token and the heart of the sea accompanied him always, reminders of the balance he carried between earth and ocean. With Lysandriel's guidance and Lady Anviel's diplomacy, the steward's accord grew into a living tapestry of guardians, farmers, healers, warriors, and dreamers united by a shared vision. In moments of quiet reflection beneath countless stars, Emrys felt the presence of those who had come before, the ancient stewards whose sacrifices paved the way. Their whispers mingled with the rustling leaves and crashing waves, urging him onward. And so, beneath the ever-turning skies, Emrys Corbin walked forward, a beacon of hope and service, the steward's eternal flame lighting the path toward a world where balance, compassion, and unity reigned supreme. Thus closed the 20th episode of the saga, not an end, but a beginning, the stewardship of a lifetime, and a legacy carried forever in the hearts of all who cherish the earth and sea. Tuta Botruyen. The Saga of Emrys Corbin, the Steward's Journey of Balance and Renewal. Mo Ta Tong Quan. Embark on the epic journey of Emrys Corbin, a humble steward from the village of Windmere, who rises to become the guardian of balance between land and sea. Through trials of remembrance, regret, reconciliation, responsibility, resolve, reckoning, and renewal, Emrys confronts ancient powers, heals poisoned lands, forges alliances among kingdoms, and battles darkness both natural and supernatural. This 20-episode saga weaves a rich tapestry of courage, compassion, and unwavering service, exploring themes of stewardship, unity, and the enduring strength of hope. Join Emrys as he transforms not only his homeland but the wider world, carrying the steward's gift toward a future where harmony reigns eternal.